Readers decide whether they trust your story almost immediately or if they should just throw it away. You only have sometimes only one sentence, but up to 3 pages to grab the attention and hook the reader. This is why the first sentence and the first page is so important in your book. In today's video, I wanted to give some examples of great hooks and great first sentences in some of my favorite stories. But I also wanted to talk about how you can create a great first line in your story, because this in itself is an art and it's really hard. But if you manage to do it, this can actually make someone buy your book. I'm also going to go through why these opening lines work so well in these stories. As you may know, I love reading dark academia, so the first example will be from Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. And the first line here is, I decided that Orion needed to die after the second time he saved my life. This opening line just makes me want to read this book immediately. It's such a great opening line, not only because it propels me with a lot of questions. First of all, why did the narrator feel like this the second time Orion saved their lives? Why not the first time? That in itself is very, very interesting. But also in this book, it has a really, really interesting narrator that we want to learn more about and we want to get to know. There are so many contradictions in this first line that it just makes me want to read on. So I love it, and it's a very smart way of opening a dark academia story. The second book I wanted to talk about was Promise to the Pyre by Vendy Emberfield. This is one of my favorite romantasy books, and I love the opening line. Being a fighter at the most prestigious combat club in town was fantastic. For me, this is just mind-blowing because it sets up such high expectations. First of all, I get the feeling that the main character is someone strong, someone prestigious, someone who wants to be in control and is used to a fight, which is also very interesting because this means that things are probably gonna go south from here, and I don't know how, because the main character is obviously already a strong person if they're a fighter at the most prestigious combat club in town. So this is also, it is contradictory, but in a different way. It makes me ask a lot of questions. It makes me want to get to know the main character and understand why they're there, and also how the world is constructed and stuff like that. So if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. And last but not least, I wanted to take a classical example, which is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So this is more of a child's story, but it really has an interesting opening line. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Private Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. This means that this is a family that, they pride themselves on trying to be super normal, trying to live up to certain expectations and stuff like that, which, make me as a reader understand that something about them is wrong, or something about this place or in this home is not normal and they're trying to hide it, or something is going to happen that will make them less normal. It is a fun and intriguing way of starting a story. It creates this open loop and makes me ask a lot of questions, which makes me want to read on. It also tells me that the world probably won't be normal like in everyday life, like the ones we live here. So I really enjoy this opening line. Another classical example is George Orwell's 1984. It was a bright and cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. This example lets us know that we're no longer in the normal world because the clock doesn't, it can't strike 13. I really love the fact that it creates this open loop and a lot of questions that I don't know what is going to happen next. And it really needs an explanation, which pulls me in as a reader. The first line doesn't have to explain everything, but it needs to create some sort of curiosity gap. It needs to want to make you continue to read. And a great first line usually has some sort of tension, emotion, or hook that make you curious about continuing. You can think of the first line like an invitation, something that makes the reader intrigued to want to stay there and continue on going forward. And usually when there have been times when I've been writing that the first line just, when I got it from scratch. But most of the time I will write the entire story and then I will go back and really, really focus on getting the first line and the first chapter to perfection. I will rewrite it, rework it, talk to my beta readers, talk to my editor, make sure that it is as good as it possibly can be. So you don't have to feel the pressure of getting it perfect from scratch, because usually that's not going to happen because you don't know the themes and the intrigues of the entire story when you start writing a new project. So remember that you can always go back and fix this later. But I would encourage you to put a lot of time and effort into crafting a good start of the story, as good as you possibly can, because this is the best way for you to hook your reader. Usually, think of it like this: when your reader is browsing for books in the bookstore, maybe they will look at the text, the blurb at the backside. But usually usually when I'm in the store, I will go in and I will read the first line or the first page just to see if the book really is for me. And then I'll decide whether or not I'll buy the book. So if you manage to hook the reader here, chances are very high that they will actually buy your book. And remember that the first chapter has one job, and that is to get the reader to keep on reading. You're not there to explain the lore. You're not there to explain the world building, to give an info dump or stuff like that. I do see that happening sometimes, especially when people have a prologue. They use that as info dumping, and that is not what it's there for. It's there to create a hook, an open loop, so that the reader will continue to read. Like in Game of Thrones. And now I don't have the book in front of me, so I don't remember exactly. But there is an ice monster prologue, or what it's called, where in the prologue we understand that there's a big threat up in the north with the White Walkers and monsters and stuff like that. But in the Game of Thrones series, we have all of these houses that keep on fighting and being in war with each other, while there is a bigger threat outside of the wall in the north. That is a great prologue, a great way to hook the reader, because as readers we have more information than the characters in the books, and that makes it exciting, because we'll be like, why aren't you doing the thing you're supposed to be doing? Why aren't you listening to the Stark family, or whatever it is? It's been a while since I've read the books, so I might be quoting it a little bit wrong, but that's how I remember it. But that is also a great way to actually hook the reader. So in the first chapter, your job is to create a question, establish tension, trigger emotions, imply conflict, or introduce the voice of the narrator. And the first, the only job of the first chapter is to get your readers emotionally invested in your story. It's not to do all of these other things that you think you have to do, because you also need to understand that you can trust the reader. The reader is a lot smarter than you think, and you don't need to over-explain things. And a strong first chapter doesn't overwhelm the reader with a lot of information. Instead, it invites it to an amazing story. But how do you do this yourself? A great framework that I love is the opening loop framework, where you create a loop that is almost like the what if question. What if do, and then the what if meaning, like you can build on it. The what if question will create more questions and more questions, so it will continue over time. This is exactly what your opening line could do. You know, why is the clock striking 13? Or why does the narrator want to kill Orion? Or why are we at a fight club, a martial arts club? There are not just one question you create with this, but multiple questions. Because if you get the answer, which you probably won't in the first chapter, there will be more questions along the way. And the way that you can do this when you write your first line is you can create some sort of question in the beginning, have something that makes them question anything that has to do with the story, like so that it captures the theme. And it doesn't have to be super powerful. Like if you feel like it's an okay first line, maybe the first page is what is great. Like don't overthink the first line too much, because you have the opportunity with the entire first chapter to actually grab the reader. So you don't have to stare yourself blind at creating the perfect first line. But you also want to have some sort of emotional reaction from the reader. If you can create emotion, I think this is the strongest way to actually hook them, because like the emotions is at least why I read books, because I want to feel things, I want to learn things, I want to understand, I want to be in the stories. Another thing that the first line can do is to establish what kind of narrator it is for the story. If it is some kind of sort of special narrator or stuff like that. And we saw that very clearly in the Deadly Education example. I feel like in Deadly Education, the voice itself, like the narrator's voice itself, actually becomes the hook. The first line also promises an interesting story. The reader senses that there is something worth discovering, or if there's some conflict or mystery. And last but not least, it creates a narrative, a tension in the narrative. So try to think of all of these when you write your first line or first chapter. Remember that this is your chance to actually hook the reader. And you are a storyteller, so I am sure that you can actually create a great first line and first chapter. I have, like sometimes when I'm not sure where the story should start, usually I will just delete the first chapter and begin in chapter 2 instead and see if that works. But there has also been instances when my editor has told me that it's been like too much has been going on and it's been too suspenseful, so I will have to move the chapters so it's not too like you can't have explosions on page 1 sometimes. So listen to the people around you, listen to your beta readers, listen to your editor, and try to like talk to people and maybe even compare different hooks with a select pair of beta readers or writer friends. That's a great way to like workshop your way into getting it as good as possible. I would love to hear the first line of your book in the comments. And if I like it, I will go and buy your book myself. So thank you so much for watching. I will be back soon.